what is alive in the darkness? And I'm using that word darkness, it's very insufficient. You might also point in there pain or death or discomfort or suffering. Being with, being present, walking into or as the darkness is entirely transformatively different than turning away from it, repressing it, trying to get to the light, trying to be somebody who has any kind of control over how light or how dark this moment is in reality. And there are times for some of us, for many of us, where the pain, the darkness becomes so big that we don't have a choice. The resistance, the suffering, the turning away from becomes so much worse than actually just being as we are. That there's nobody doing it, but life brings us into that darkness, that life opens us up as we are in that moment of pain, of hurting, of being a vulnerable, tender human being, into the embodied space of darkness, not the reflective, contracted, identified distance from it, but the embodied presence of what's alive in this moment. And often what we find when we actually shift into the body is a lot of anxiety, fear about how uncomfortable we find ourselves in the contraction to it, in the conditioning we've had around whatever it might be. Don't die, don't experience loss, don't experience shame, don't experience sickness, of failing of the body, whatever it might be. All of the don'ts and the shouldn'ts and the can'ts and too much and not enough is embodied. It's absolutely embodied. And when we get really close to it, when we turn towards it, when we enter it, then there's no need for reflection or an interpretation. And then we feel, even just beneath what we might label discomfort, we feel the movement, tightening, hardening, aching, or this kind of bruised tenderness of being this mortal body that loses and has an end point, although that paradoxically there is none. Of course there is, this form, how humble we are in knowing our own expiration. And so the more we turn towards and enter and embody that darkness, that pain, or this moment that we're trying to avoid, when it doesn't feel so bright and sunshiny and spiritual and worthy, the more we embody and turn towards, the more this kind of reverse conditioning, like this softening into allowance of being who we are, becomes an okay place to be. And there's a release in that, even physiologically, the softening, the contraction, the easing of what we might experience as bracing in the diaphragm or the neck or the arms or the belly. And there's a greater depth of capacity to be present. And that really is that movement of endarkenment, if you want to call it that, this invitation to deepen presence, our access to presence. We would never ask for that invitation, right? We would never ask for the kinds of unimaginable pain and suffering that happen on a human level. Even when it's no one's fault, no causal reason, no fairness or unfairness, that there's just this tender pain that can happen in our lifetime. But that has this gift. I don't know what other word to call it. Of really feeling our ability to go into the here and now, to meet it fully. And as we do so in this shadow realm, we find a greater ease. And it's not with the agenda of, let me liberate myself from the shadow so that I never have to feel it again. Because there's no end. This form and formless is infinite. The light as well as the shadow. The unity as well as the personal. This is not about hurry up and heal or dive deep and get to the bottom. It's about really meeting the presence in all forms, in all fractions of light. And that when we're present and moving from presence, rather than being preoccupied with resisting it or managing it, but really feeling our embodied truth in each moment, then we are moving from this field of unity. We are in alignment with the whole, our interdependence, our interconnection, our compassion, our confidence, our creativity, our aliveness, like the surrender, the awakening to pain, to suffering, when it is actually happening in this moment, not the mind's reflection of it or drawing it in from another moment, from the past, the future, some imagined moment, but when there's actually pain arising and we need it, that does bring us into alignment. And that does contribute to the caring for the whole rather than the chaos and the suffering and the ignorance and the stupidity and the delusion that we all are familiar with. It's not about waking up to shadow or light with an agenda or some outcome that will be somebody or will be safer or will be more worthy, more peaceful. And as soon as we can let that reflection or that thought or that grasping go, then it actually becomes those facets, not in any way that we can imagine or try to create. But awakening to the fullness of who we are in this moment does benefit everyone, everything, life, this planet. Maybe not in a way that we can even fathom or have ownership over. And it's not some concept that you, or that these words are pointing to, that you should believe or take my word for, take someone else's word for, but to really live into that in an alive way is to actually experience it. And it's very humbling because the mind will always disagree. The reflections, the nervous system, when it's not attuned to this moment as it's arising in this environment, as it's unfolding, will always be so convinced in a sense of urgency that I need to control this, or something needs to be managed or conquered. It's never gonna usher you into the surrender of what's here, especially if it's darkness, if that means there's threat to the system. And that's okay, because it's also an innocent movement that can also be felt and held in this moment as it's arising without reactivity. But as part of the pain of being human. Yeah, we have these minds that can be so organized and these systems that can be so intelligent, and they can get tangled. And so I know that the time is closing, and I'll just kind of close with, it's the words can become so slippery because there's so many connotations, even with a word like pain or darkness, and the connotations are not at all how the aliveness of living into pain and darkness in this moment is actually experienced. It's actually quite a relief and quite nourishing to be able to be with the rawness of being alive, however it may arise. So thank you so much for inviting these words in, and I'll pause here.
We have 2 more minutes, Chelsea. You like to spend it in silence, or you have?
Yeah, silence sounds beautiful.
Stay in silence until those 2 minutes. And thank you.